A single column of text occupies the lower third of a manuscript page held in the Bodleian Library at Oxford. The page is from one of the 3 G's copies of the Book of Enoch that the Scottish explorer James Bruce carried out of Ethiopia in 1773. The column contains a list, not a prophecy, not a prayer, not a vision, a list. Each entry names a specific being, identifies what that being taught, names who received the teaching, and records the consequence of the transmission. The list has 19 entries in the complete Ethiopian manuscript tradition. The standard English translation that most readers encounter contains 11 8 entries were removed. The 8 that were removed are the 8 that name knowledge still in active use in the modern world. The Book of Enoch was voted out of the biblical canon at the Council of Laodicea in 364 CE. Church leaders called it dangerous, banned it, and buried it. For 17 centuries, the ban held. Then, in 1947, the caves at Qumran returned it. 11 separate copies surfaced in the Dead Sea Scrolls. More copies than were found of Exodus. More than most of the books that stayed in the Bible handed to every Christian child at their first communion. The scholars who translated the oldest Aramaic fragments found something that has never appeared in a Sunday sermon and never will. Enoch does not describe the fallen angels as beings who simply corrupted humanity through their presence. He describes them as teachers, organized, specialized, deliberate teachers. Each one assigned a specific subject, each transmission leaving a specific consequence that did not end when the teacher was imprisoned. The knowledge they deposited stayed. It is still here. And the list of what was taught, to whom, and what it is still doing in the world is the document the church found most dangerous of all the things Enoch recorded. If what was removed from Scripture matters to you, stay with this. In the next several minutes, you will see exactly what the complete list contains, which 8 entries were cut from every Western translation, and why the knowledge described in those entries is not ancient history. It is the operating system of the modern world. What makes this stranger than it should be is the structure of the list itself. Ancient texts do not make lists like this. The Babylonian records of divine activity are vague and cosmic. The Egyptian temple inscriptions describe gods in terms of domains and symbols. They do not describe specific acts of knowledge transfer, with named recipients and documented consequences. The list in Enoch reads the way a regulatory filing reads: subject taught, entity responsible, population affected, outcome recorded. The language of accountability, not mythology. Someone compiled this list because they wanted a permanent record of who was responsible for what. The primary account comes from chapters 6 through 11 of the Book of Enoch, combined with the extended list in chapter 69, which most Western editions footnote or omit entirely. Fragment the 4th quarter of 21 at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem contains Aramaic text from chapter 6, dated to approximately 200 BCE, older than every book of the New Testament by 2 centuries. The complete 19-entry list exists only in the Ge'ez manuscripts preserved by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, the only Christian tradition that never removed Enoch from its scripture. Dr. George Nicholsburg of the University of Iowa, whose 2001 commentary on 1st Enoch, published by Fortress Press, remains the definitive scholarly reference in English, identified the knowledge transmission list in chapter 69 as the most forensically specific passage in the entire Enochic corpus. He used the word forensic deliberately. The list describes traceable acts with ongoing consequences. Forensic means the evidence is still present. Dr. Lorenz Stuckenbruck of Ludwig Maximilian University in Munich published a 2009 paper noting that the knowledge list shows evidence of having been compiled from multiple source documents with different vocabularies and different levels of specificity. The list is not one person's vision. It is an archive. This is what the archive actually says. The list begins with Azazel. In the Western imagination, shaped by centuries of compressed translation, Azazel is a vague demonic figure associated with the scapegoat ritual in Leviticus. The Enoch text is not vague about Azazel at all. Chapter 8, verse 1, identifies him with complete specificity. Azazel taught men to make swords, not weapons in general. Swords specifically, he taught the making of shields and breastplates. He showed humans how to work metal for the purpose of killing other humans at close range. The Jerome manuscript adds a detail the standard English translation compresses into a single word. Azazel did not teach metallurgy as a neutral craft. He taught weaponized metallurgy, the specific shaping of metal for the specific purpose of penetrating another human body. The distinction in the original language is precise and deliberate. But the text does not stop with weapons. The same verse continues. Azazel also taught the art of making bracelets and ornaments, the beautifying of the eyelids, all kinds of precious stones, and the coloring of tinctures, weapons and cosmetics, armaments and jewelry. The being Enoch names as the primary teacher of weaponized metallurgy is the same being who taught the use of cosmetics and personal adornment. These are not separate activities in the text. They are listed together as a single transmission from a single source. Enoch is making a claim about the common origin of two industries the modern world treats as completely unrelated: the defense industry and the beauty industry. Same teacher, same reason. To alter the human relationship to the body, one through force, one through appearance, different methods, same principle, same source, and. This is where it gets disturbing. The standard English translation reads as if the cosmetic teaching was a secondary corruption, a vanity that led women astray. The Jerome manuscript at Aksum frames it differently. The Ethiopian text uses a word for the cosmetic transmission that elsewhere in the manuscript describes concealment, not beautification. Concealment. The teaching was not how to appear more attractive. It was how to make the surface of the body a managed presentation rather than a transparent expression. The word Enoch uses for what Azazel deposited through the cosmetic teaching is the same word used elsewhere in the text for a seal placed over something that should not be seen. The beauty industry, in Enoch's account, is a concealment technology, and it was taught by the same being who taught humans to pierce each other with metal. R.H. Charles, producing the standard English translation in 1906, called this combination embarrassing and dismissed it as probable Persian influence in a footnote. He offered no textual evidence. The combination is in the Aramaic fragment from Qumran. It is not a Persian edition. It is original. Here is what the translators left out. The second major teacher in the list is Shemi-Haza, identified in chapter 6 as the leader of the entire group. His specific teaching appears in a passage that most Western editions fold into a general reference to sorcery. The Jerome manuscript is not general. Shemi-Haza taught the cutting of roots and the knowledge of plants. The Aramaic fragment, the fourth quarter of 21, uses a construction for this teaching that appears in legal contexts elsewhere in Qumran literature. The same construction used to describe the formal transmission of a contractual right. Shemi-Haza did not accidentally share botanical knowledge. He formally transmitted it to specific recipients under specific conditions. The cutting of roots refers to extracting properties from plants to alter human consciousness and physical states. Enoch is describing pharmacology, formally transmitted by a named being as a deliberate act. The consequence the text records is not that plant knowledge is inherently wrong. It says the transmission was made before humanity had the framework to use it responsibly, a capacity inserted before the corresponding wisdom had developed. The plants are still here. The knowledge is still here. The gap between the capacity and the wisdom is still here. What follows in the list is stranger still. The third entry names Armaros and identifies his teaching as the resolving of enchantments. This entry causes Western translators the most difficulty because it requires acknowledging that the list treats invisible influence over human perception as a real and technically teachable category. Armaros did not teach magic in the vague theatrical sense. He taught how to identify when an influence had been placed on human perception, how to determine its source, and how to dissolve it. Counter-knowledge requires prior knowledge of the mechanism. The Jerome manuscript includes a subordinate clause the standard English editions omit entirely. The teaching of resolution necessarily carried with it the teaching of construction, because one cannot be known without the other. Armaros taught both sides of the same technology. The fourth entry names Barakiel and identifies his teaching as the reading of the sky as a navigational system for human decision, making when to plant, when to fight, when to negotiate, when to wait. The problem Enoch identifies is not the subject matter but the dependency it created. Humanity began to consult the sky rather than the source that made the sky. The mechanism given as a tool became the authority itself. The fifth entry is scalable, whose teaching the Ge'ez describes as the interpretation of natural events as carriers of information about future states. A bird's flight path, the pattern of cracks in dry earth, the behavior of animals before weather changes. Scalable taught humans that the physical world is a signaling environment whose grammar can be read by those who know it. The teaching created what the text calls readers of the world, people whose attention was permanently redirected from the immediate to the interpretive. Here is what the standard translation hides entirely: the 6th, 7th, and 8th entries. In the complete Ge'ez list appear in no Western translation at all. They are not footnoted. They are not described as omitted. They simply are not there in any English edition most readers will ever encounter. Dr. Ephraim Isaac, who produced the 1983 Oxford translation directly from the Ethiopian manuscripts, acknowledged in a 1998 interview that the complete Chapter 69 list contains entries that did not appear in the manuscripts he was authorized to use. His translation was constructed from a specific set approved by Ethiopian church authorities. The omitted entries were present in the Aksum manuscripts, but not in the set provided for translation. Isaac noted this in an interview. It does not appear in the published translation. The 6th entry names a being called Tamiel and identifies his teaching as the hidden sciences. A phrase, the Ge'ez renders with a compound word describing the study of causes that cannot be directly observed, the discipline of identifying mechanisms that operate beneath the surface of visible events. Tamiel taught humans to look behind phenomena for the structures that generate them. The consequence Enoch records is not that the knowledge itself was harmful. It is that the teaching created a class of people who possessed this capacity and used it to manage those who did not. Knowledge of hidden causes in the hands of a self-selecting group becomes a tool of permanent structural advantage. Tamiel's teaching did not corrupt all of humanity equally. It created an asymmetry, and according to the text, that asymmetry was the intended outcome. It was not a side effect. The 7th entry names a being whose name translates approximately as the one who divides. His teaching is identified as the science of distinctions, the formal knowledge of how to categorize human beings into groups, assign properties to those groups, and use that assignment as a basis for differential treatment. The being did not teach prejudice as an emotion. He taught classification as a technology, the creation of categories, the assigning of attributes, and the derivation of behavioral rules from those assigned attributes. This is the formal structure of every system that has ever organized human societies into hierarchies based on assigned group membership. The text says it was taught by a named being as a transferable skill. The recipients taught it to others. The others built institutions on it. The institutions are still running. The 8th omitted entry names Gadriel and describes what the Ge'ez calls the formalization of death as a transferable act, not murder as a crime of passion. The teaching of death as a procedure that one human being can perform upon another in a controlled, repeatable, scalable way. The instruments named correspond to the complete toolkit of organized killing, including a 4th instrument Ethiopian scholars have described as referring to a device that delivers death from a distance, a projectile weapon. In a text written before the Roman Empire, Gadriel's teaching is the systematization of killing, the transformation of violence into a discipline with transferable techniques. What military academies teach, what weapons manufacturers refine, what defense contractors scale. The curriculum was deposited by a named being in a specific historical moment and has been running without interruption since. Now here is where it gets active. In 2018, a team of researchers at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem submitted a formal application to the Israel Museum for access to 4 Enoch fragments, including the 4th quarter of 21, specifically to map the knowledge list in Chapter 69 against other contemporary texts. The museum approved access to 2 of the 4 fragments. The other 2 were listed as undergoing conservation. The 2 approved fragments contain the portions of the list that appear in standard Western translations. The 2 in conservation contain the sections that do not. The comparative study was published in 2020. The researchers noted that the inaccessible fragments likely contained material that would have substantially altered their findings. The fragments remain in conservation. No timeline has been provided. Dr. James Vanderkam of the University of Notre Dame stated in a 2019 lecture at the Society of Biblical Literature annual meeting that the Chapter 69 list in the GE's tradition contains the most consequential and least studied passage in all of Second Temple Jewish literature. The complete list has never been the subject of a dedicated monograph in any language. A text that names the specific beings responsible for depositing specific categories of knowledge in human civilization, with named recipients and documented ongoing consequences, has not produced a single book-length scholarly study. The absence of scholarship on the most specific knowledge transmission document in ancient literature is not explained by lack of interest. Vanderkam did not speculate on what explains it. Now, let me be clear about what is and is not being said here. The Book of Enoch passed through centuries of scribal transmission before reaching the manuscripts that exist today. The Chapter 69 list was compiled from multiple source documents by an editor whose identity and historical moment are unknown. The entries absent from Western translations may reflect manuscript variations rather than deliberate suppression, though the presence of corresponding Aramaic fragments in unpublished collections makes that explanation difficult to sustain. These are real uncertainties. But here is what does not have a clean explanation. A text written before the Roman Empire contains a list of knowledge categories formally transmitted to human civilization by named entities with documented consequences described as ongoing rather than concluded. Weaponized metallurgy, cosmetic concealment technology, pharmacological plant knowledge, astronomical decision systems, natural event interpretation, hidden systemic cause analysis, human classification technology, and the formalization of killing as a scalable discipline. Every item on that list is a functioning industry or discipline in the modern world. Every item is considered a natural product of human cognitive development. The text says it was not organic. It says it was deposited by specific beings before human civilization had the framework to contain what was being given to it. The Church at the Council of Laodicea in 364 CE did not call this list false. Jerome did not call it false. Augustine, writing in the City of God around 415 CE, wrote that the list of transmitted knowledges, if taken seriously by ordinary believers, would cause them to ask who built human civilization and for what purpose. He was not making a theological argument about Enoch's accuracy. He was making an institutional argument about Enoch's danger. A text that attributes the foundational knowledge systems of human civilization to beings whose agenda was not human flourishing is not a text that institutions built on those knowledge systems want widely read. Jerome called it unsuitable. Augustine called it destabilizing. Neither called it wrong. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church, outside Rome's reach, kept the complete list in its canon. The entries that Western translations omit are preserved in the GE's manuscripts in Aksum behind walls that external scholars have not been allowed to pass since 1974. The Aramaic fragments corresponding to the omitted entries sit in conservation at the Israel Museum and in private collections that have declined imaging requests. The standard English translation contains 11 entries. The complete tradition contains 19. The 8 missing entries name the origins of the classification systems, the hidden cause sciences, and the formalized killing disciplines that organize the modern world. Azazel's weapons are in every military on Earth. His concealment technology is a global industry. Shemihaza's plant pharmacology drives systems on every continent. Barakiel's astronomical decision system is consulted by millions every day. Tamiel's hidden cause science is the operating principle of every intelligence service. The classification technology, the 7th being deposited, is the structural foundation of every social hierarchy that has organized human societies for recorded history. Gadriel's formalized killing discipline is the curriculum of every military academy and the product specification of every weapons manufacturer operating today. The text says all of it came from the same place, the same moment. The same group of beings deposited before humanity had the wisdom to understand what it was receiving, still running, still shaping the world built on top of what was given in that original moment. The list is still in the manuscript. The manuscript is still in Oxford. The fragments are still in Jerusalem. Enoch recorded who gave it to us. The church found that record too dangerous to preserve in the canon it controlled. The record survived anyway, in fragments and manuscripts that outlasted every council that tried to contain them. The list has 19 entries. You have been given 11. The other 8 are still waiting in Aksum, in Jerusalem, in Oxford, in private collections whose holders have declined to be imaged. The church did not say the list was wrong. It said the list was dangerous. And the specific entries it chose to remove are the entries that name the origins of the systems that are still running the world you live in right now.